Why, hello, it's Miss Gina, and you're at Gina's Planet. It's time for bedtime stories. I wish. At Gina's Planet, you're with Miss Gina. Hello, I'm Miss Gina. And we started yesterday, Wishworks Inc., and we were talking about Max. And so we're on Chapter 2 with Max. Remember, we left him looking out the window. So we're just going to dive right in. This is our new chapter book, or one of them. We're going to be reading simultaneously, more books than one at a time. I think we'll have a total of this one, Little House on the Prairie, and then we're going to add Secret Garden will be our new selection. So you can choose which one you want to follow. You have some choices. Okay, so Mother said that evening, while Max was helping himself to more hamburger casserole, "How was the second day in the new school?" Her forehead was wrinkled with concern. He'd heard her talking to Grandma on the phone, and he knew she was worried about them. She was worried about them, Grandma was. "Great," his sister Polly said. "I made another friend." How did Polly do it? Max wondered gloomily. Here they were in a whole different part of the city, having to start a new school more than halfway through the year, and already she had 2 friends. Besides, Polly didn't have to worry about bullies. If there was a kid like Nick Berger in Polly's first grade class, he probably wouldn't pick on a girl. Polly had cried the night they moved into their new house, which was really only the first floor of a house that was attached to other houses on both sides. It didn't even have a yard to play in, so she didn't have her swing or her sandbox anymore. Mother had held her in her lap and told her that she would get used to their new life. There are good things here we didn't have in the old neighborhood. She reminded Polly that the park was only 2 blocks away, and it had even more playground equipment than their old school's playground. "It'll be okay. You'll see." Excuse me. And sure enough, by the end of the first day of school, Polly had been talking about her nice new teacher and a friend named Sophia. Max told himself he didn't need friends. Other kids never wanted to do the things he liked to do. Besides, adventure time, his most favorite thing of all, he could do all by himself. He could have adventure time anywhere, even here in a house jammed right up against other houses. "Max," Mother asked, "how was your day?" He hadn't mentioned Nick Berger and his henchmen yesterday. He didn't mention them now. He didn't want Mom worrying about him. It was okay, he said. That wasn't even a lie. Not really. It had been fun imagining all those things happening to Nick Berger. After dinner, Max helped with the dishes and sat at the table to write out the 10 spelling words he had for homework. Then he went to his room. It didn't feel like his room. You think simultaneous is one of his spelling words? Maybe. It didn't have windows on 2 sides and looked out into the yard with trees that were just starting to get their new leaves. The only window in this room looked out at the apartment house behind them. There was a draft that came in around the window, even when it was closed. This room was chilly at the time. Lots of his things were still in boxes. The boxes were still stacked against the wall, even now. What was in most of them? He should unpack them. His mother said because having his belongings all around him would make the room feel more familiar, more like home. Max was afraid it would seem even less like home to see his old things in his new place. The one thing that felt the same was his bed. His wizard sheets were on it, and the patchwork quilt of suns and moons and stars that Grandma had made. Grandmas are great at making quilts, aren't they? Now, Ali Baba, the cat, who had been a member of the family before Max and Polly, was curled up in the middle of his midnight blue pillow, one paw over his nose. The fat gray cat was snoring gently. Ali Baba was one of the reasons Max could only have an imaginary dog. Ali Baba didn't like real ones. If King were real, Max thought, Ali Baba could go sleep on Polly's bed instead of Max's. King would sleep with Max. He would stretch out right up against Max's back and keep him warm, even in this chilly room. And even if Max moved in the night and disturbed him, King would never put a claw into Max's foot, and Ali Baba did sometimes. Best of all, if King were real, he wouldn't be there only when Max was imagining him. He would be there all the time, always ready for adventure. Adventure is out there, so I've heard. Max pushed Ali Baba off his pillow. The cat moved down the bed a little. In no time, he was snoring again. Max pulled down his blind so he couldn't see the apartment building anymore. Then he fluffed his pillow and settled himself against it. There he is, laying on his bed with his real cat, Ali Baba, and his imaginary dog, King, laying on his stars and moon quilt that his grandma made him. How nice. Looks cozy. He looks comfortable. Polly had gone to bed and his mother was watching television. It was adventure time, the best time of the whole day. Actually, Max thought adventure time would be better in this new life than in the old one, because here, Dad would never come barging in to ask what he was doing. He would never ever lecture Max about what he ought to do to be a regular kid. Max didn't want to be a regular kid. He could tell from what they talked about at school that regular kids watched television before they went to bed or played video games. Some of them read books. All the stories on television or video games or in the books were stories somebody else had made up. None of these stories could be his very own. You think he's a writer? What Max did was much, much better. Here by himself on his bed, with nobody to interrupt him and nothing he was supposed to be doing. Instead, he could create whole worlds. He could go anywhere and do anything. There was nobody to tell him that imagination was childish and useless and a waste of time, and stop daydreaming. I think it's important to let your imagination be used. You can use it to imagine the scenes that he creates in his head. See the picture in your mind. Max wasn't crazy about Real. Real was a father who wanted him to be somebody he wasn't. Real was arguing and fighting and crying and divorce and having to move. Right this minute, Real was this room and didn't feel like his, and a new school with kids he didn't know. Worse, Real was Nick and his henchmen. And it was Mrs. Chang who stayed with him and Polly after school and gave them only carrots or broccoli for snack. Maybe broccoli with ranch dip. And here, just like in the old house, Real was boring. Old Ali Baba, who never did anything anymore except eat and sleep. Max put his arms around his legs and rested his chin on his knees. He remembered the last adventure he and King had had together. Let's see if I can get my page turned. They had started on the sidewalk outside the new house. There were lots of other people on the sidewalk. just like always, near the shops on 8th Avenue. All the people passing by had looked at Max and King and admiring glances. They did it with admiring glances, like, that looks interesting. New people. They were impressed by how beautiful King was and how well he behaved. Some of the people were walking dogs. There was a big, black, ferocious-looking dog that growled at King. King ignored it. His attention was focused on Max. There was a little white fluffy dog at the end of a jeweled leash being walked by a woman in a frilly dress. Suddenly, there had been a loud rumbling sound and the sidewalk right in front of them cracked apart. Dust and smoke poured through the cracks, and a huge, green, hairy monster climbed up and over the broken cement. The woman in the frilly dress screamed, "Ah!" People began to run. The monster reached out and snatched up the white fluffy dog in his claws. The little dog howled at the monster. Sorry. Opened its jaws, showing long, sharp, jagged teeth. "Help! Help!" yelled the woman. "It's going to eat Pookie, not Pookie." "Get him, King!" Max had shouted over the howls of the little dog. King jumped in front of the monster and began biting its toes. The monster hopped from foot to foot, yelping as it juggled the little dog. There it is, juggling the little dog. There's my version. Juggling the little dog in its claws. Max grabbed the end of the dog's jeweled leash and pulled. The little dog popped out of the monster's claws, and Max caught him as he fell. King kept biting the monster's toes as it backed toward the crack it had climbed out of. Max took the dog back to its grateful owner, who thanked him through her tears. "No problem," Max said. "My dog can do anything." It had been a very satisfying adventure. Now Max closed his eyes and felt himself getting very, very still. It was almost like disappearing. Sometimes he thought if Mom or Polly came into his room while he was off adventuring, they wouldn't be able to see him. It wasn't true. He knew. His father could always see him, even if Max was adventuring clear off on another planet. But that's how it felt. It was as if he really, really went away into the story he was telling himself. Sometimes Max planned ahead of time where he would go and the kind of adventure he would have. Other times he let the story create itself. Tonight he would just call King to go with him and see what happened. Whatever it was, it would be more fun than real life, Max thought about King, and there King was, ears up, tail wagging. He's only got one. Typo. Error. Reader error. Tail wagging. King was always ready for anything. He's always ready. So that looks like their sidewalk corner there. It's his little town. Max imagined himself on the sidewalk. That's where we'll start and pick up on Chapter 3 next time. And this was Wishworks Inc. And it says on the back, what would you wish for? What would you wish for? So you can be thinking about that. But we'll be on Chapter 3 next time. So I hope you enjoyed that. I want you to remember to read more in 2024 and grow your brain and dream and make goals and set plans for yourself. If you can think it and dream it and believe it, you can do it. So dream big. And I'll see you next time, and I hope you enjoyed that. Bye-bye.